Ethan Cole's morning began like every other, chauffeured ride, coffee in hand, eyes buried in stock updates. But that routine shattered the moment his SUV pulled up at a red light on 7th and Main. Raindrops streaked the window as the city slowly came alive, people rushing by in coats and umbrellas. That's when he saw her. A small figure curled on a weathered bench beneath a flickering bus stop sign. A little girl, no older than 7, wrapped tightly in a torn blanket, her knees tucked into her chest. She wasn't sleeping so much as surviving, her eyes flickering open and shut as cold crept in. Ethan leaned forward instinctively, trying to get a clearer view. The girl's backpack, clearly too heavy for her frame, sat nestled against her as if it were her only possession in the world. Her hair was damp, her sneakers soaked through. And yet, there was something heartbreakingly composed about her. No tears. No begging. Just silence. The kind born of exhaustion and too many unanswered questions. For a man worth billions, who built empires and bought silence with a pen stroke, this moment stunned him. It wasn't her poverty that struck him, it was her stillness. A child with no place to go, in a city that never stopped moving. The light turned green. His driver asked, "Shall we?" Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at her, haunted by something he couldn't yet name. But that image, Lily on the bench, wouldn't let him go. Back in his high-rise office, Ethan Cole stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline. The rain hadn't let up. Drops slid down the glass like quiet tears. Behind him, the hum of the boardroom faded as executives argued over quarterly reports and profit margins. But Ethan wasn't listening. His mind was still at the bus stop. He couldn't shake the image of that little girl, her thin frame curled on that bench like she was trying to disappear. Something about her had cracked open a part of him he hadn't touched in years. He saw flashes of his own childhood, nights spent waiting for his mother to come home from her third job, meals that came from vending machines, winters without heat. He had clawed his way out of poverty with relentless ambition and ruthless focus. He'd built walls so high around his past, he thought he'd buried it. But Lily, he didn't even know her name yet, had brought it all back in an instant. He turned from the window, ignoring the notification blinking on his phone. Instead, he sat down, his hands steepled in thought. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about acquisitions or shareholder value. He was thinking about a child alone in the rain. What was the point of building skyscrapers, he wondered, if they cast shadows over kids like her? That night, as the city lights flickered below, Ethan made a quiet decision: tomorrow, he was going back. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Ethan was already in the back seat of his car, no suit, no tie, just jeans, a sweater, and a heaviness in his chest he couldn't explain. "Take me back to 7th and Main," he told his driver. There was no meeting scheduled, no assistant briefed. This wasn't business. This was personal. As the car approached the intersection, his eyes searched the sidewalk with quiet urgency. And there she was, exactly where he'd left her. Lily. She sat hunched on the same bench, her blanket soaked through, shoes muddied, clutching that same worn-out backpack as though it contained her entire world. Ethan stepped out into the morning chill, his shoes splashing in shallow puddles. He approached slowly, not wanting to frighten her. She looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide, cautious, but not afraid. "Not yet." "Hi," he said gently, kneeling down to her level. "My name is Ethan." She said nothing, just gripped her backpack tighter. He looked at her for a long moment, seeing the layers of silence and strength wrapped around her tiny body like armor. Then he reached out his hand, not to grab, not to pressure, but to offer. "You don't have to stay here," he said softly. "Come with me." For a second, she didn't move. The city roared around them, horns, footsteps, sirens. But in that moment, it all went quiet. Then, slowly, she nodded. She took his hand. And just like that, everything changed. Ethan didn't take Lily to an office or a shelter. He took her home. Not to the towering penthouse with its glass elevators and marble floors, but to the quiet house he rarely used, the one on the edge of the city, with creaky floors, warm lamps, and a fireplace that had gone unused for years. He made her hot chocolate. Let her pick which room she wanted. Gave her space, silence, safety. Over the next few days, Ethan learned more than he expected. Her name really was Lily. Her mother had passed 2 years ago. Her aunt, who was supposed to care for her, vanished one night and never came back. Lily had been surviving on her own ever since. Sleeping in corners, dodging questions, living between shadows. Ethan brought in a child psychologist, a doctor, a tutor. No media, no PR. Just quiet action. He didn't want credit. He wanted her to be okay. But one child wasn't enough. Every night, Ethan read more statistics. Thousands of kids like Lily in the city. Homeless. Invisible. Forgotten. It gnawed at him. So, he restructured his company's outreach division. He created a new foundation, quietly funded, expertly staffed, focused on housing, education, and long-term support for at-risk children. He converted an old corporate building into a center for child welfare. And he showed up, not just with money, but with time. Lily, once silent and guarded, began to smile. She danced in the kitchen. She made silly faces at the dog. Healing had begun. For both of them. The auditorium was filled with applause, flashing cameras, and the scent of fresh flowers. It was graduation day at Eastbridge Academy, one of the top schools in the state. On stage stood a poised young woman in a royal blue cap and gown, her curls tucked neatly beneath the cap, her eyes scanning the crowd. Lily. Ethan sat in the front row, a little older now, silver streaking his beard, his hands folded tightly in his lap. He watched her with a pride he couldn't put into words. Lily stepped up to the podium. The room quieted. She took a breath. 12 years ago, she began, voice steady, I was sleeping on a bench at a bus stop. I was cold, hungry, and invisible. A pause. Then she smiled softly. But someone saw me. Not for what I looked like, but for who I could become. Tears welled in the eyes of many. Ethan blinked slowly, holding back his own. He didn't ask where I came from. He didn't need my story. He just looked at me, reached out his hand, and said, "Come with me." That's all it took to change my life. Lily looked right at Ethan. And because of that one act of kindness, I'm standing here today, not as someone who was rescued, but as someone ready to change the world for someone else. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Ethan smiled, his heart full. Kindness had started it. Love had carried it through. Hope would carry it forward.